had the annual meeting, and I have to ask you what your favorite moments of that were.
What I like is that both the shareholders and the employees of Berkshire are so extremely enthusiastic. And it's not just that they've made a lot of money and have nice careers. They think they're on the right side.
And, you know, they come there to hear you guys talk all day. And
yes, like a cult.
It's like a cult?
Yeah.
In a good way, though.
Yeah, a good cult. Yes, a good cult.
Okay. I mean, in the stuff that they hear, some of it's new, some of it's old, and a lot of it is common sense. And you were talking a lot about
all of it is common sense.
Right.
But of course, when people use the word common sense, what they mean is uncommon sense, because the standard human condition is ignorance and stupidity. And so when they say old Joe has common sense, what they mean is he has uncommon sense.
I guess it's a bit of a misnomer then, but
it really is.
So, yeah, why is it that people can't think clearly about investing or decisions in their lives?
Well, they don't think very well about sex or gambling either. No, the standard human condition is a lot of miscognition.
And there are ways to make hay of that, or?
Yes, you can take advantage of other people. You can improve your own life by eliminating your miscognitions.
Let me shift gears a little bit, Charlie, and ask you about the U.S. economy. And what is your take on where things are right now?
Well, obviously they're booming, but you know, the economy sometimes booms and sometimes it doesn't. And you have to live your life through both episodes. And our attitude is we just keep swimming, and sometimes the tide is with us and sometimes against. But we keep swimming either way.
Are you surprised by how long this expansion has lasted?
Of course, it's lasted a long time. But what was really remarkable is that we never printed money so much and spent it so fast and bought back so much debt, public and private. So this is total terra incognita in economics. And nobody knew for sure how it was going to work.
So is it risky then?
Of course it was risky, but it worked. And I don't think they had much else that would work. They weren't set up to do stimulus. Too much controversy, democratic inertias, the various guys. So they had to do something, and all they had left was just to print money and start buying things. And that's what they did. And it turned out to be a very wise response. And what's even more remarkable is that both Congress and the presidency and under both parties made the same decision. They all cooperated. It was the last time.
But where is that going to leave us, ultimately?
Well, it left us licking the Great Recession, so maybe we ought to try cooperation again since it worked so well once.
How much is President Trump responsible for this current economic situation?
Well, I think he deserves some credit, but a lot of it just happened.
Economic cycle?
Yeah. And the decisions of his predecessors.
What do you think about the president's campaign to lobby the Fed to lower rates or keep rates low?
Well, I think presidents have always done this. If you're a politician in a democracy, of course you want people to print money and spend it. And of course it's not a good idea. The best example probably in the whole world is Singapore, which has zero debt and never prints money and spends it, and is one of the most successful places on earth. I wish we were like that, but there's only one Singapore.
Well, some people now say that federal debt is not a problem at all.
Well, if you believe that, you believe in the tooth fairy, because then we don't have to have any more taxes ever. We'll just print money and live happily ever after. It obviously won't work.
So
there comes a point when printing money is counterproductive.
Are we at that point? Are you concerned?
No, I don't think we are at that point, but nobody knew where the point was going to come, and we don't know now. None of these people who are so pompously sure of things, because we all want reassurance, and so they provide it. But nobody really knows how much of this is too much.
And do you have any thoughts on Jay Powell and the job that he's done?
Well, I think a lot of him. I think he's as good a choice as we could have made.
One consequence of this expansion, or actually it precedes that, it's just something that's occurred in our economy over the past 50 years really, has been wealth and income inequality.
Yeah.
One, do you see it as a problem? Two, if so, how do we address it?
Well, it's a problem if enough politicians are screaming about it. That makes it a problem. If it weren't for that, this one will go away by itself. It happened by accident. We were in desperate trouble. We were on the eve of a Great Recession that could have been a Great Depression, and then followed by the rise of people like Adolf Hitler and so on and so on. So we faced a real catastrophe. The only weapon they had with this huge was to print money and spend it. And they did it. Well, of course, and they drove interest rates down to zero, or real interest rates. Well, of course, that lifted asset values for the people who were already rich. Nobody was trying to make the rich richer. It just was an accidental byproduct of a correct governmental decision made on a bipartisan basis. And since it was a weird byproduct that occurred in a weird time, it will go away by itself in due course.
It'll go away by itself, you
Sure.
think? So there's no reason for...
The people that are screaming about it are idiots. It's going to go away by itself. Now, that's not to say that we can't raise the minimum wage a little and enlarge the social safety net a little. We should be doing that as we prosper. Both parties agree on that.
What do you think about the proposals put forth by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Elizabeth Warren that would sort of greatly address this problem?
Well, I don't consider those two necessarily the best prescribers in the world. They're kind of likable. I particularly kind of like Elizabeth Warren. She's got a manner that appeals to me.
Really?
But I don't agree with her attitude. I don't think she's studied Adam Smith enough.
And what about AOC? Do you have any take on her?
I don't think she knows who Adam Smith was.
I want to ask you just a few more questions about politics, and we can talk about the markets and Berkshire a little bit more. What about the situation that we find ourselves in with the Muller Report and the way Congress and the Democrats are fixating on that and the president's on the defensive? What is your thinking on that?
I tend to avoid the whole subject, just as I ignore tide with me, tide against, and just keep swimming. Both parties are so partisan now that they're blinded by their anger, and I don't want to be blinded by my anger, so I control it, and I would recommend it to both parties. I think they should all cool it.
Why are we so divided up, Charlie, right now in this country?
Well, anger, when you pound on one another, feeds on itself. That's one of the great difficulties with it. It's irrational and it feeds on itself. So I liked the world when it was Dwight Eisenhower against Adlai Stevenson, and more civility, and Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill got along, and a lot of it was done. My war was a bipartisan war, and in the aftermath, foreign policy of the United States was a bipartisan policy. I like that world better. I hate this extreme hatred on both sides.
Will we ever get back to those days, or get to new days where we don't have the hatred?
Probably. If you live long enough, a lot of good things happen and a lot of bad things happen.
Fair enough. It's my understanding, Charlie, that you were instrumental in helping Warren get away from focusing on the cigar butt form of investing and looked more towards companies that I guess you could call them branded companies.
Better businesses.
Better businesses, right?
Yes.
How did you help him make that decision?
Well, it was perfectly obvious, and he'd made so much money in the other technique that it was hard for him to leave something that had worked so well. But it was not going to scale, so when he started looking for investment values in great businesses that were temporarily under pressure, it changed everything for the better. Now we could scale up to the big time.
Are Apple and Amazon technology companies, or are they brand companies?
Both.
Someone told me they asked Warren if he could buy one brand, this was about 40 years ago, what that company, what that brand would be, and he said Gillette, which makes sense. What would that company be today?
CocaCola.
Still?
If you take the amount of Coca-Cola drunk in the world in the main flavor, it's one hell of a brand. Now, it's such a different product from this stuff on the internet. I don't have the same. My judgment would not be as good on the internet as it is on Coca-Cola.
I want to get back to Apple. Tim Cook was at the meeting yesterday.
He was indeed.
Did you get a chance to speak with him?
I did.
Can you tell us what you guys talked about?
Nothing. We exchanged pleasantries. But he's a wonderful guy, and of course it's a huge record that he's building.
Let me ask you a little bit about Kraft Heinz and that situation. During the meeting yesterday, we found out that the chief marketing officer was leaving the company. Did you know that, and what does that mean for the company?
I knew nothing about it in advance. What happened there was very easy. The truth of the matter is that Heinz ketchup is a stronger brand than Kraft cheese, and they paid more for it. So one acquisition worked brilliantly and the other worked poorly. Well, welcome to adult life. It happens to everybody.
You mentioned that you think that Tim Sloan could still be or should still be the CEO of Wells Fargo?
Yeah, if I were running the world, Tim Sloan would still be the CEO of Wells Fargo.
Well, why did he leave then?
Well, he made this decision, but he was being pushed hard. He did it for the benefit of the company. There was just so much of this partisan hatred was washing off against Wells Fargo. It's understandable. He was there for a long time. The company had defrauded its own customers. Nobody was seemingly being punished for it in some people's minds. Listen, 2 CEOs left under pressure. I regard that as a lot of punishment. So I don't think these people were failing with their anger. They removed 2 CEOs, and so, but now they went out, it's like Tim Sloan was not responsible for the crazy incentive system that created the trouble. So they threw him out the way you take out the charwoman when you raid a gambling establishment.
Getting back to Coca-Cola, you mentioned that it would be a bad idea if it got into cannabis. I mean, why not? Doesn't it make sense?
Because it's such a wholesome brand and associated with happiness. Why do we want to associate it with a recreational drug?
Well, they have to grow.
I think that would be a terrible idea.
What about Boeing and the 737 MAX? I mean, they're going to fix that. Would you go on the plane?
Of course they're going to fix it.
Would you go on the plane after they said it was fixed?
Yes, of course. And they will fix it well. But I don't think it was really all that excusable that they made the mistake.
I want to ask you, Charlie, a little bit about...
No, that was a serious mistake.
Yeah. So and they're still working on it.
Yeah, they'll fix it. Boeing probably has the best safety record in the world if you take 60 years. And this was a very unusual lapse. There may not be another one for 60 years.
Is that lapse symptomatic, though, or indicative of us developing software that's too powerful and we don't understand the consequences of it?
No, I don't think the problem was that. I think it was just an absolute lapse of being a big bureaucracy.
You also mentioned at the meeting yesterday doing billion-dollar deals overnight with very short contracts.
Yeah, we've always done that.
Has that ever blown up on you?
I can't think of a single example in my whole life where keeping it simple has worked against us. We've made mistakes, but they weren't because we kept it simple.
And that's simple.
I would say that the chief advantage that Berkshire has had in accumulating a good record is that we have avoided the pompous bureaucratic systems. We've tried to give power to very talented people and let them make very quick decisions.
I want to ask you about something that's talked about all the time with you guys, which is succession. And you talk about that all the time, and this has been countless barrels of ink spilled. But if you're getting older, how do you make the decision to step back if you may not have the mental acuity to make that decision?
Well, I think you'll be surprised at how well both Warren and I are capable of stepping back when we feel our powers are too far deteriorated.
Have you talked about that?
Sure. And Warren has told people to speak up when the time comes. If we've been rational all this way, do you think we're not going to try and be rational right to the bitter end?
Is the process, I mean, we're sort of in the middle of the process. You've been giving more and more control or authority to Ajit and Greg and Todd and Ted. So it's sort of a continuum, a process like that?
Of course. And by the way, it's working fine. It's amazing how good this next generation is. And they're steeped in our non-bureaucratic ways. There's these big bureaucracies, they think the work is done if you get it out of your inbox and into somebody else's inbox. That is not getting it done. Getting it done is when it's done, not when it's in somebody else's inbox. And if everybody's in a big committee meeting all the time, you're worn out at the end of the day and you haven't done anything.
Are Ted and Todd making all the stock choices at this point?
No, of course not. Warren steps in and does big things.
Where do you think, Charlie, the biggest opportunities are globally right now?
Well, I don't think we have a master plan of knowing where the opportunities are. We're trying to find intelligent things to do with a torrent of surplus cash. And we've always had a torrent of surplus cash. And we're always looking for intelligent things to do with it. And if we find things that are intelligent to do, we do it. And if we don't find anything, we let the cash build up. What the hell is wrong with that?
Not much.
Yeah, not much is right.
So I know that you guys have talked about England, or it seems that you have, because Warren talked about doing this article in the FT as basically a way of signaling potential interest given that Brexit may create some opportunities. Is that the case?
What the hell do I know about Brexit? I don't even know how I'd vote on it if I were in England. Yeah, I don't know much about it. Look, we'll react to opportunities wherever they are, and we regard the vicissitudes of politics as it's just what they are, vicissitudes.
But isn't it a little bit more than a vicissitude to drop out of the European Union? I mean,
I'm not suggesting it isn't a good deal, but this country was enormously helped when we put all the colonies together. If we had internal tariffs against each little colony, the United States would not be as big as it is. So it's understandable why Europe wanted to get together. And in addition to the advantages they got from the free trade, they'd had a long history of having wars. And we all are sort of one big place trading with one another. It'll be safer. Those were very good ideas. I'm not quarreling with the basic ideas. On the other hand, if you have unlimited immigration from one country to another, that causes lots of strains. Look at Germany. Merkel brought in more immigration than her people she wanted. She was leading a parade and she looked back and nobody was following. So these Very few people want unlimited immigration of a different culture. We made it work in America, but we had a vacant continent to work on. It was easy. Vacant and rich, oil, minerals, wonderful soil.
Should we still be letting immigrants into this country?
I think we should have way more control of our borders than we do.
Isn't that
different? Trump is right on that, and I think the Democrats are committing suicide by being so. They hate him so much that they're against him even when he's right.
It seems like the borders is conflated with immigration policy sometimes, though, right? I mean, in other words,
of course they are.
Yeah.
But I think we ought to have some control over immigration, some effective control. I think the bulk of the people want to be very nice to the people that are already here, including all the people from Latin America, but they want more control over the inflows.
Are you concerned about this rise of somewhat nationalistic leadership around the world, like in Turkey, in Brazil, in China, in the United States, arguably?
Well, take Brazil. Who in the hell would like Brazil? It's a great climate and a great country, but they're screwing it up to fairly well.
You mean the new leader, or just what's happened previously?
What's happened generally.
Yeah. Okay. So does that require a strong man to take over, though?
Well, I don't think I've got deep knowledge on exactly what works well in the internal politics of every other country. Who would have guessed that the Chinese communists would improve their big country as much as they have in the last 30 years?
That surprised you?
Well, they didn't. The first 20 years, they had the Cultural Revolution. It was crazy. And now they have one of the greatest success records in the history of mankind. I don't know about you, but I did not predict it.
I didn't. So what is the secret to China's success then?
They copied Singapore.